Welcome to World Talk Brief. Okay, let's get right into it. We're looking at a pretty high-stakes standoff that's putting the entire NATO alliance under some serious pressure, and it all centers on one place, Greenland.
So, what we have here is a rapidly escalating diplomatic mess, really, between the US and some of its closest European allies. And it's all about the strategic territory of Greenland. We're going to break this down into 5 key parts so you can see exactly what's happening and, why it really matters.
All right, first up, Trump's ultimatum. And really, this is the core of the whole story. It all starts with a very direct, very unambiguous threat from former President Donald Trump.
So, when he was asked point blank if he'd actually go through with these tariffs he's been threatening, his answer was 100%, no hesitation. And his target? Greenland. It's a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, and he is demanding that Washington buy it, period. He sees it as a critical strategic asset that's just not up for debate. And believe me, this isn't just talk. He's laid out a very specific 2-stage plan here. It involves slapping escalating tariffs on 8 NATO allies. We're talking a 10% tariff, hitting countries like the UK and Denmark, starting February 1st. And if a deal isn't reached, well, that jumps to a pretty steep 25% for others, including Germany, come June 1st.
So what's the justification for all this? Well, according to a post on Truth Social, it's because Greenland is imperative for national and world security. He's framing this as completely non-negotiable, an absolute necessity. He's basically saying there's no going back on this.
Okay, so how did Europe react to this ultimatum? Well, they've come out with a surprisingly united front.
Denmark, obviously, is at the center of this, and they've made it crystal clear that threats are not going to work. Their foreign minister, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, put it bluntly, saying Europe has red lines that can't be crossed. This just isn't the way to get things done.
And the European Union is right there with them, echoing that exact same sentiment. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, said, look, we're not looking for a fight here, but we are absolutely going to stand our ground. The principle is simple. A country's sovereignty is just not for sale.
And this support for Denmark isn't just from 1 or 2 places. It's pretty widespread. You've got key allies like the UK, Germany, and Norway all publicly backing Denmark. They've put out statements reinforcing Danish sovereignty and calling for things to cool down. So what you have is a really solid block of opposition. So this war of words is now starting to spill over into military movements. And that, of course, raises the stakes even higher. We're seeing a couple of different things happening on the ground. First, some European NATO members sent a very small, what they called symbolic, deployment of troops to Greenland. And it was right after that move that the tariff threat was announced. Then, on the other side, you have the US and Canada, operating as NORAD, sending several aircraft to the island. They're calling it a routine operation that's been planned for a long time. Now, the focus of this North American operation is the Pituffik Space Base, which is incredibly strategic. And NORAD is trying to downplay any idea that this is an aggressive move. They're stressing that this whole thing was coordinated with Denmark and that Greenland's government was kept in the loop.
Okay, now here's where things get a little weird. There's this strange side story bubbling up that's adding another layer of tension to all this, and it involves a dispute between Trump and Norway over the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, you heard that right. In some recently released text messages, Trump straight up blamed the Norwegian government for him not winning the Nobel. It's a very personal grievance being thrown into an already really tense international situation. So the disagreement here is pretty fundamental. Trump claims that Norway totally controls the prize, despite what they say. But Norway's Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, tried to explain that no, the prize is awarded by an independent committee. The government has nothing to do with it. But that distinction seems to be at the heart of the conflict. So, where does all of this go from here? Well, the next few days are going to be absolutely critical. The calendar is just packed. There's a high-stakes meeting happening this week in Switzerland between, as they say, various parties. Then on Thursday, the EU is holding an emergency summit in Brussels to get their story straight on a unified response. And all of this is happening with that February 1st tariff deadline just hanging over everything. And all this really brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Is this just an incredibly aggressive negotiating tactic from a former president who's famous for his hardball transactional style? Or are we looking at something much deeper, a fundamental challenge to the very unity of the NATO alliance? How that question gets answered is probably going to shape the relationship between the US and Europe for years to come. And you can bet we'll be watching it very, very closely. Subscribe to World Talk Brief for more clear, thoughtful explanations. World Talk Brief, news explained without the noise.